Welcome back. You're watching Business Morning on Channels Television. We're still continuing our focus on matters with regards oil and gas sector, looking at Nigeria beyond oil, the future of the economy. It's conversation that has been ongoing. It goes on every day, never stops. Thinking of new ways for how policies and actions can be implemented to ensure that Nigeria begins to really seriously move away from oil and focus on other sectors of the economy that can generate revenue. Let's talk to Taiwo Oyedele, who is a partner, head and tax regulatory services at PwCs this morning. A good morning to you and thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
So yesterday, PwCs and LCCI had, a forum and talked about Nigeria beyond oil and the future of the economy. Was there anything different about the report that PwCs presented yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people talk about diversification. Different governments have been saying it for many years, but I think most times it's not evidence-based. And you don't have enough data and analysis to actually tell you exactly what you need to do, how you need to do it. Because we, of course, have limited resources, where should you start? And which sectors will have the biggest impact? So what we did in collaboration with the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry was to say, let's put this into number and just get some data. And we actually carried out a survey of more than 70 business leaders across 18 different industries in Nigeria to say this is how Nigeria should diversify in practical terms. So that's essentially what the report is all about.
So taking a look at that report, I was hoping that we could look at some of the slides that you had actually put together, talking about the amount of solid minerals the country has, which is about 34. There's 84 million hectares of arable land. We're the 9th largest gas reserve country. We have an average of 177 million people and 2.7% growth rate. 3.5% per annum for urbanization. The numbers are really large. Now, looking at those 70 companies, what were the key impediments that were actually identified by them to achieving economic diversification?
Yeah, okay, so I'll come to that in a moment, but just to give you, one perspective, we think that if we get our diversification right, Nigeria can be top 10 economy in the world by 2050. Will be worth more than $6.4 trillion. At the time, we would expect that population will be more than 300 million people. So we're going to be like the top 4 most populous in the world because we're growing at a very fast rate. And I read a report recently that says Nigerians produce more babies than the entire Europe. So we're really productive. But the danger in that is if you don't provide for them, it's just sitting on a gunpowder that will explode with time. So we asked these business leaders, what are the impediments? What are the things we need to do? And they highlighted key issues. One for them was corruption was an issue for them. So it's good now we are fighting corruption, but sometimes you also want to take a step backward and say, are we really fighting corruption or just corrupt people? Because it's a systemic issue, and you must deal with institutional and both economic institutions and political institutions to be able to address those issues. So corruption was one. There was issue with infrastructure. That seems like a no-brainer. And then they had issue with low level of skill. So you've got millions of people looking for jobs, and business leaders are saying we can't find people to do our jobs. So that's where you have this gap in terms of human capital skill. And then beyond that, they also had issues with macroeconomic uncertainties. In fact, 44% of those leaders said to us that they are delaying their investment. And these are not just foreign investors, these are also Nigerian investors. So you're at a situation where things are so uncertain and you're almost doing nothing. Now, if you have 44% of your investors delaying investment, that is significant. So which means if we can address the macroeconomic policy issues, to address the uncertainty, you never be able to guarantee 100% certainty, but let it be that the uncertainties you have are the ones beyond your control. For example, the price of crude oil, we can't control it, but we can control how long it takes people to register a business and stuff like that.
So You're basically saying the same thing that a lot of people have said since oil prices started falling in 2014. We know the issues, we know the challenges, but do we know? We also know how to solve it. But are we taking those steps to solve it? So it doesn't seem as if it's always just talk. You do a report, you do a survey, you find out where it's pinching everybody. But are we ready? Is the government ready to take the actions needed to ensure that the issues that people have identified, corporations and organizations such as yours have also identified, are addressed?
I'm not sure we're taking steps yet, but I'll say there are indications that we will take steps. Maybe on one hand, because we have a new government that is really interested in fixing Nigeria, if there's anything like that. And two, because we pretty much do not have any other choice. You're having states that are unable to pay civil servants. That's a disaster waiting to happen. So we have to do something. Tax to GDP ratio is very low. So what we're doing differently is to say, even when you talk about diversification, we have to narrow it down. Even the petroleum industry itself requires significant diversification, away from just upstream into downstream, petrochemical, refining, and the rest of it. If you look at agriculture, you need a lot of diversification there. It's not just about producing raw materials. Nigeria can earn up to $59 billion from exporting agricultural products. And that will be more than what we currently earn from oil and gas and tax combined.
Let me ask you a quick question. Do you think that there are economic saboteurs that are preventing Nigeria from achieving economic diversification?
Well, I'll say yes, without a doubt. I think human beings, and it's not as if Nigerians are just terrible people, it's that human beings anywhere in the world are naturally selfish. So if I was importing generators, and that's the business I have, I wouldn't want Nigeria to have stable electricity because that would stop my business. So what you need to do is, beyond trying to identify those that are trying to sabotage our efforts, you should build processes and systems that make it impossible for them to do it.
Or even integrate them into the system.
Exactly. Tell them what's in it for them. Yeah, so we heard that the NNPC this was on social media, I don't know whether it's true, that even the pipelines, whenever we put products into them, they think that there are some staff within the NNPC that would alert some guys that would go and blow them up. So you're wondering, you have refinery that you fix it today, you do turnaround, the day after tomorrow, it's back to where it started because there are some guys who don't want the refineries to work. So all these issues are there, and a lot of it would be, let government just hands off. Private sector is known anywhere in the world to be able to do business better than government. But those private sector people would not invest unless they are sure, or at least have some level of certainty as to what is going to happen to them. If you look at the success story of the Nigeria NLNG, last year was in the news that they bailed out some states. It wasn't as if they gave a donation. They just paid their taxes and the dividend to government because government is shareholder in the company. But guess what? Before they invested, the billions of dollars they invested, government had to enact a law to guarantee them fiscal environment, regulatory environment, to say, when you put in your $5-7 billion, it won't go down the drain. Nobody will come back tomorrow and say, you know what, we awarded a license. You know, about 2-3 years ago, we awarded licenses for power generation. Another person reversed it and said they didn't follow due process. Another person came back and reversed the reverser. So if you keep reversing everything, you're like a driver who is better at reversing than moving forward. You don't get to your destination.
So in terms of moving forward, now how do you think the legislature can drive economic diversification? Because you mentioned policies, and that's the lawmakers, National Assembly, they are responsible for putting together these bills and the laws.
Yes, absolutely. We had the National Assembly, both the Senate and the House of Rep, as well as the executive represented by different ministries yesterday at the presentation. The point to start is to identify those sections of our laws that are stopping us from growing and diversifying. And they will range from things like the requirement to register a business, registering property. Some guys want to register their property, they've been on it for years, they just can't register it. Now, if you can't register your property, it also has an effect on how you can access capital because you now don't have collateral. It also moves beyond that to how you pay taxes, the procedures you have to follow, the forms you have to fill, information that is not available, even when you want to comply. So those ones that have to do with the law, including the Constitution itself, the lawmakers have to fix those things. For them to fix them, they must be aware that indeed these are problems we're facing. As we speak now, there's at least 3 different bills at the National Assembly seeking to introduce new taxes. Whereas one of our fundamental problems or challenges is multiple taxation. So definitely there's a disconnect. So what we're trying to do is let's pass the message to the right people, get them to understand the impact, what they are doing and what they fail to do are having on the economy, get them to do that. The executive will deal with the day-to-day and long-term policy around waivers, incentives, macroeconomic policy. What do you do with monetary policy? Should you fix exchange rate? Should you allow the market rate to drive it? And so on and so forth. But those things must handshake and connect before we can make real progress.
But then how do we get the government to adopt the recommendations contained in this report or any other report, for instance, that has been put together showing very clearly how Nigeria can move beyond oil?
Yes, usually what has been missing is the political will. I also have to acknowledge that many of the recommendations you see flying all over the place, you can't implement them. They don't make a lot of sense. You see people say, you need to give more incentive, you need to pay people who are unemployed some money and stipend. It's the same government that has nothing to even pay people they've employed. So what we've done is to come up with practical solutions. Now, the way to implement it is, like I said, we had the engagement with the National Assembly, the executive and the private sector. We're going to follow through. We're going to be attending the retreat in Abuja next week, the presidential retreat. We're going to still be talking about some of these issues. It doesn't guarantee that these things will be implemented, but we're optimistic that some of them will be implemented.
Fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Taiwo, for coming on the program
Thank you
this
for having
morning.
me.
Taiwo Oyedele is a partner, head and tax and regulatory services with PricewaterhouseCoopers, talking to me on Nigeria, looking beyond oil, the future of the economy. We'll be talking about the equities market in a moment with Rotimi Fakayejo, CEO, Enterprise Stockbrokers. Join me again.